You saw the thumbnail, we are talking about Avatar's good writing.
I'm Just Fallen and watched this series with both adults and room full of 10-year-olds.
I'm a teacher, I've taught writing at various grade levels, and we're looking at Avatar's near perfect introduction. A good introduction in writing needs to do one of two things: get you intrigued by the characters or the world, ideally both for fantasy writing. So let's start with the introduction of the setting. An intro needs to get its world established, but having too much narrative exposition can get boring or overwhelming, so the more you can do it through natural dialogue, the better. And that brings me to the point of the video, how Katara's single line is so clever and proactive. Sure, she starts with exposition for the show, an extended version of the one that would be played instead of a traditional theme song. It says all it needs to say and it doesn't overstay its welcome. But that's not why we're here.
See, the truly masterful writing comes from the scene right after.
The show starts with a barren icescape of water and, well, ice. There's nothing magical or whimsical about it. The show's opening establishing shot shows that this is in fact not a magical world in the traditional sense of the word. It's quick to establish that these settings are ones that are closer to the real world. Now we have Sokka, a normal dude, trying to catch a fish. Cut to Katara using water bending to catch the fish as traditional Asian music comes in. Sokka gets drenched, setting up for one of the most important lines in the series.
Why is it that every time you play with magic water, I get soaked?
It's not magic, it's water bending.
It's significant what power this one line has on the entire series that proceeds after. And to understand why, we need to understand children's simple vocabulary. The word magic is thrown out a lot. For example, I called psychic Pokemon as a kid magic type for the longest time. To add to this dilemma, there was this best-selling book in its prime during the airing of this first episode that was all about magic. The writers clearly wanted to differentiate bending from magic, but why was this seen as such an issue? It comes down to the nature of Avatar's magic system. It's a closed system with specific rules. Now contrast this to magic, which usually has no bounds in many of its iterations. The characters are non-fiction otherwise, the landscape through the entirety of the show could all be duplicated by real-world cultures. Finally, the bending itself is treated as a martial art that's an extension to, again, real-world movements. It's not magic, it's not superpowers, it's something that takes discipline to learn. This is the crux of the show, and it would do the show a disservice to call the one fantasy aspect it revolves around by the name of magic. So the creators made sure the magic was simply not in the show's vocabulary. Don't fact check me on this, but the only time the word was used again was by this little girl, just to have the same conversation play out again.
Magic trick, do it again. Not magic, airbending.
From those that actually watched the show, I never heard them use magic to reference Avatar.
Even children, and that's pretty impressive. This goes to show just how careful the creators were about making the show's magic system and being sure the viewer clearly understood it as well. But why does this vocabulary vagueness problem even exist in the first place? Well, closed descriptive magic systems that need a name are rare to find in children's fantasies. There's two reasons for this. One, it's simply harder to flesh out, and two, it requires more exposition for the viewer. And if that viewer is a child, you could be fighting against a fleeting attention span. So how did Avatar do it right? The value of this concept can get lost, but you learn to appreciate it more rewatching the series multiple times with students that are the original age demographic. First episodes for TV shows are hard enough, but have one as ambitious as Avatar on a channel like Nickelodeon and you have your work cut out for you.
Adults, they appreciate world building and explanation. Kids, not so much. Now, I don't want to throw them under the bus and say they have no attention span.
But when you're not invested in the characters or show yet, it can be hard at that age to want to pay attention. Season 1 is more lighthearted and jokey for that reason, but you can see how Avatar masterfully showcases its awareness and talent in regards to this problem in the first quarter of the 2-part premiere. The action starts 3 minutes in, continues to build bigger and bigger for a good minute 30, leaving us with a giant iceberg that anyone would be enticed to see what's inside. Here we have constant intrigue and action, complemented by Sokka's witty dialogue. After a more serious introduction of Iroh and Zuko, more on that later, we fall into a steady rhythm of exposition, comedic relief, repeat. Aang is introduced, joke. Appa is introduced, joke. The threat of the Fire Nation is introduced by dialogue for the first time, joke. Introduce airbending, joke. Introduce that Aang can fly, joke. So sure, exposition through jokes is a great tool, but it does have its downsides. It runs the risk of diluting its characters and or story to, well, a joke. So thankfully the show is also responsible enough and did not tarnish its newly introduced villains by using the same formula with them. Iroh could have easily dropped a goofy line during their delivery of information, as he does in future episodes, but without any knowledge of these characters yet, they could have easily been portrayed as, well, cartoon villains. The creators had enough respect for the show to use humor as a median of information only on its main, currently lighthearted cast and not its current antagonists. Rewatching, it actually seems odd how serious Iroh is, only dropping one goofy line the entirety of the first episode. So from the start, Avatar shows us that it knows when to respect itself and when it can use humor to hold attention. So it goes unsaid how much Sokka's naysaying attitude carries the entire introduction of the show. Without it, the momentum of the jokes would fall flat. Sokka is so crucial to the first episode because at this point, he is by far the most relatable.
He is a stand-in for us viewers, unaware and confused by the world's fantasy elements.
The viewer can naturally learn through him as more exposition unfolds. His personality is naturally likable, and the delivery by Jack DeSenta is perfect for the role.
This is Appa, my flying bison.
Right. And this is Katara, my flying sister.
Now, Aang is introduced as a harmless but flawed human, a character viewers can easily attach themselves to as the journey progresses. His personality shortcomings quickly become apparent as the show introduces his internal conflict. Internal conflict is nothing special, but in kids' TV, it's a good indication that you're in for something grand when it's not quickly resolved. Sure, if you watch, say, anime, you're used to internal conflicts or shortcomings that have a long arc, but remember, this was aired on Nickelodeon. Most watching were used to internal conflicts resolving in 30 minutes. Katara is a fine character in the first episode, but she's just kind of there for necessity, as are Iroh and Zuko. But Iroh and Zuko are characters that need a long time on screen to be fleshed out, so yes, they're just sort of there to progress the story as well, but their character types are ones that also end up being the most nuanced and appreciated as the series plays out. But this just goes back to why it's so important to have Sokka, an instantly likable character, to be part of the cast. To carry these earlier episodes, he keeps us hooked early so we can stick around for greater payoffs later. So grading the intro to Avatar, I give huge praise for the first quarter. It knows its audience, knows what it's trying to establish, the jokes hit, it's well paced, it's a perfect example how to write a great introduction. Unfortunately, it is followed up to what I feel like is a week 2 force of the premiere. The pace is slow, there's really no jokes to hold attention, and the only action was the penguin sledding race, which had no stakes. But after most of the exposition is out of the way, the show does get back on track. Aang and Katara are trapped, and the build-up to the climax begins, which all had solid action, great dialogue, a climax that leaves us with questions, and an outro that sets the series with a clear long-term goal. Overall, I give the 2-part premiere an A-. Not because I think this is one of the most absolute best episodes of Avatar, I really don't think it is. I give the high grade because of what they had to do, put an ambitious show in front of kids and find a way to get them hooked into a long-form series,
One that they can appreciate even more as an adult. Thanks for watching.